Jason was a 19-year-old young man whose childhood had been filled with hardships. His mother passed away when he was very young, and his father abandoned him shortly after. Left to fend for himself on the streets, he fell in with the wrong crowd and was drawn into a life of crime. What started as small thefts quickly escalated into more serious crimes as he became part of a gang. However, deep inside, his conscience never fully disappeared. Jason wasn't a bad person. He had just taken the wrong path. One night, Jason and his gang decided to rob a luxurious mansion. Everything was going as planned until something unexpected happened. Someone was inside. Chris Evans. He had been attending a charity event at the residence, and now he stood face to face with a young man whose face was hidden beneath a hood. Jason froze in panic. But when their eyes met, Chris saw something different. It wasn't the look of a hardened criminal. It was fear. Jason tried to run, but in the chaos, one of his gang members accidentally triggered the security alarm. As sirens wailed in the distance, the rest of the gang managed to escape. Jason wasn't so lucky. The police arrived, cornering him. He braced himself for the worst, expecting to be dragged away in handcuffs. But then Chris Evans stepped forward. "Give this kid a chance," he told the officers. In that moment, Jason's life was split in two. He could either go to prison or take the opportunity to start over. Chris got Jason out of police custody, but he gave him a condition. "If you really want to change, I'll help you." Jason didn't believe it at first. No one had ever really given him a chance before. People always saw him as nothing more than a troublemaker, a criminal. The idea that someone actually believed in him felt like a joke. But there was something different in Chris's eyes, genuine sincerity. Even so, Jason wasn't sure of himself. If you've already fallen, is it really possible to stand back up? As a child, Jason lived in a small apartment with his mother. They never had much, but she always found a way to keep him fed. No matter how difficult life got, as long as he could hear her voice, he believed that everything would be okay. But one day he came home from school to find her collapsed on the floor. She had suffered a heart attack. By the time he found her, it was already too late. The years that followed were nothing but a fight for survival. No one wanted to adopt him. After bouncing between foster homes, he eventually ended up on the streets. That's when the gang found him. They welcomed him with open arms, not because they cared, but because a kid like Jason was just another tool for them to use. Within a few years, Jason's life had completely revolved around crime. Theft, threats, fights, these became his normal. But no matter how much he tried, he could never silence his conscience. Unlike the other kids in the gang, he wasn't cruel or ruthless, but he believed that being tough was the only way to survive. And then Chris Evans came along, and for the first time Jason saw that there was another way. Chris took Jason to a film set. Jason had never seen anything like it before. People were smiling. Everyone had a purpose. This world was nothing like the one he knew. Chris gave him a tour, explaining how things worked behind the scenes. "This could be your second chance," he said. At first, Jason wanted to refuse. "I don't belong here," he thought. But then he asked himself, would he rather rot in the streets or try to learn something new? Days passed, and Jason started working on set. He carried lights, arranged props, and helped the crew. For the first time, he was doing something good, something that didn't involve hurting people. But no matter how much progress he made, the voices from his past kept creeping in. "You're a criminal. You'll never change. No matter where you go, we'll always be there." Chris noticed Jason's struggle. He saw the fight going on inside him. One day, he pulled Jason aside and spoke to him privately. "You have to believe in yourself, Jason. Your past doesn't define you. You can be whoever you choose to be." Those words echoed in Jason's mind. Who did he want to be? Would he choose this new life, or would he let his past drag him back into the darkness? Jason was starting to feel happy working on set, but deep down, he was afraid. Afraid that one day, it would all fall apart, that he would have to go back to his old life. But this time, something was different. This time, he actually had a choice. The real question remains, can Jason truly change, or will his past come back to haunt him? When Jason's former gang realized he was trying to change, they were furious. To them, Jason wasn't a person. He was a tool, a loyal soldier meant to stay by their side forever. Once you're with us for life, they reminded him, making sure he understood that there was no easy way out. As Jason continued working with Chris, the threats started. It began with warnings, then escalated to intimidation. One night, Jason found himself cornered in a dark alley by his old friends. "Did you betray us?" one of them spat. Jason took a deep breath. "I just want out. I want a different life." The gang leader grabbed him by the collar, eyes burning with rage. "No one walks away from us," he growled. At that moment, Jason knew he had to make the biggest decision of his life. Would he go back to the only world he ever knew, or risk everything to finally escape his past? That night, Jason made his choice. After work, he went straight to Chris Evans and told him everything. The threats, the pressure, the weight of his past. "No matter what I do, they won't let me go," Jason admitted. Chris listened carefully, then placed a firm hand on Jason's shoulder. "Sometimes, taking a second chance takes more courage than staying in the past. But you deserve it." But Jason didn't realize that his past was already hunting him down. As he walked home, his old gang was waiting for him. He was a target now. The fight broke out in the middle of the street. Jason fought back, but they were too many. Punches landed hard, kicks knocked the breath out of him. He struggled, but they overpowered him. The gang leader stepped forward, a sinister grin on his face. "Did you really think you could leave?" he sneered, pulling out a knife. Jason's heartbeat thundered in his chest. He stepped back, but there was nowhere to run. The blade flashed in the streetlights, and then darkness. Chris Evans had a bad feeling that night. He sent Jason a message, but there was no reply. The uneasy feeling grew stronger. Then a phone call came. Chris rushed to the hospital. The doctor's words echoed in his ears. "He lost a lot of blood, but he's fighting." Chris stood in the cold hospital hallway, hands clenched into fists. Changing a life wasn't enough. The person had to fight to live it. Through the window, he watched Jason lying in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines. His breathing was uneven. He had taken the second chance, but life had hit back hard. Chris leaned against the glass, whispering, "If you come back, you'll win this time." But no one knew if Jason would ever wake up again. Would he survive? Or was it already too late? Days passed. Jason remained on the edge of life and death. Then, one morning, he opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Chris Evans, sitting by his bedside. Jason's voice was weak, but full of emotion. "You never gave up on me," Chris smiled. "I gave you a second chance. That means you have to fight for it." Months later, Jason was fully recovered. He had left his old life behind, continuing to work on film sets. But this time, not just as a crew member. He was creating something of his own story. One day, a young boy approached him. "Are you an actor?" the kid asked. Jason smiled and nodded. "Not yet, but one day I will be." Chris watched from a distance, a quiet sense of pride filling his heart. Second chances are real, he thought, as long as someone believes in them. And just like that, a life was completely transformed.